Ooh, sorry about that. Technical difficulties there. Did not expect that. The Wi-Fi just straight up and died on me, so had to reset the old router there, and yeah, so that we are technically challenged here, maybe. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. The Wi-Fi just totally cut out. Wasn't expecting that. That kind of sucks, but anyway, here we are. I guess that was pretty early into the stream, so I apologize for that. Technical difficulties. So yeah, hey, hey, what is up? I apologize for that. Nature of the game, I suppose. It happens to the best of us. So how's it going again? I appreciate everyone for tuning in after that. I apologize. Kind of trying to regather myself after that happened, but anyway, so yeah, like I was trying to talk about, just trying to get right back into it. I just had some thoughts here on the final culmination of the storyline of Lalo Salamanca. And, just kind of I think I sort of remember what I was talking about before this stream cut out. But anyway, of the three deaths that happened, like I said, Lalo Salamanca's death was a necessity, more or less, based on the canon of Breaking Bad, with Gus Fring's dialogue of "Now the Salamanca name dies with you," and so in that sense, it was somewhat, for lack of a better term, predictable. And to tell you the truth, just to kind of get into it, when as soon as this confrontation happened in the laundry, just as soon as Gus Fring, decided to go to the industrial laundry and was just looking around, as soon as this confrontation happened, I still had a little bit of plausible deniability on what was going to happen. But as soon as Gus Fring encountered Lalo Salamanca and he shot those four henchmen, I knew it was up for Lalo. I mean, everything that had just been building over the course of this season, it just had to culminate with this. It just absolutely had to culminate in his death, because with just everything that happened here in this scene, with all this information that Gus Fring told to Lalo, it had to happen, and anything else would just be absolutely an error in continuity. That was sort of what I was getting at before the stream cut out. And like I said, just to sort of rank these three deaths, I would have to say that in a sense that due to the fact that it was somewhat predictable, I'd have to say that it was again, I don't want to say again, it's kind of hard, the just three unbelievable episodes, and just, I was actually rewatching Rock and Hard Place today, and I was just, again, just unbelievably captivated with this sort of ending story of Nacho Varga, and just how unbelievably unexpected that was, and how even after he took that gun from Juan Bolsa and slipped out of his, zip tie handcuffs, I thought there had to be an out here for Nacho Varga. I still was holding out hope until he, placed the gun beside his head and pulled the trigger. I still thought Nacho has to get out of here somehow. But in full disclosure, as unbelievably intense this scene is here with Lalo Salamanca and Gus Fring, just this unbelievable scene, totally captivated by it. At the same time, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I mean, and again, they did kind of, not so subtly reveal the sort of electrical switch that Gus Fring was going to, kick with his foot, and as well as the gun which he planted back, I believe in the episode entitled, was it Black and Blue? He planted the gun in the sort of the construction machine. That by no way takes away from just the unbelievable, just brilliance of the scene. But if I had to rank it, it's by no fault of the character's own. Of these three characters, Lalo Salamanca is truly the only character who was dependent on dialogue from Breaking Bad in such a fierce way, because Gus Fring says that just notorious piece of dialogue of "Now the Salamanca name dies with you." So again, just pretty unbelievable scene here. So and yeah, like I said, the Insider podcast was pretty amazing for sure, and it was actually kind of interesting to sort of see Vince Gilligan sort of talk about these two characters a little bit, and how he basically, in his opinion, he said there are three geniuses in this entire universe, and they are, in no particular order, Walter White, Gus Fring, and Lalo Salamanca. It was actually pretty interesting. If you go back and listen to that podcast, he said, if, in an alternate universe, I'm somewhat paraphrasing here and editorializing, well, more paraphrasing, but in an alternate universe, if Lalo Salamanca was somehow able to get the better of Gus Fring, maybe, he would have been the one who would have been victorious in this entire universe. Maybe he himself could have gotten the better of Walter White. And again, it's actually kind of interesting. I don't remember the exact interview, but I definitely remember an interview where I believe if I'm not mistaken, was Giancarlo I don't remember exactly what the context of the interview, but it was more or less talking about how, compared to Walter White, Lalo Salamanca seemed to be a more sort of formidable adversary, maybe, just in the sense that over the course of this season, we saw Gus Fring in such a vulnerable sense that we'd never seen him before, and he was nowhere near this vulnerable even when he was going back and forth with Walter White. He was always sort of 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead of Walter White, and while Walter White was able to get the better of him, like Gus was able to get the better of Lalo Salamanca, it was almost more just a sort of, momentary error in judgment. I mean, it's a pretty somewhat common trope, I feel, in storytelling, the sort of, the very, intelligent sort of villain character letting his guard down momentarily. And, this one little bit of, I guess, emotional lapse that he allows himself ends up being his ultimate downfall. So, again, just an unbelievable story here. I mean, Lalo was just such an unbelievable character. I mean, I've talked about this a little bit. I'm a big fan of films like There Will Be Blood. And I really kind of enjoy the fact that there really is no protagonist or antagonist in that film. It's very ambiguous. Characters like Daniel Plainview or, Eli Sunday. It's very ambiguous who the sort of hero is and who the sort of villain is. And even the way that film ends, it ends so ambiguously. Not to give it away too much here, but it just ends on such an ambiguous ending. It's so open-ended for the characters who are left standing in that film. I was kind of wondering if maybe we could get somewhat of a conclusion like that for Lalo Salamanca, potentially. But again, I just feel like if Lalo Salamanca was to continue to live, I really feel like we'd need an entire season's worth of sort of cultivating that storyline in order to have it make sense and have it not, strongly contradict the storyline of Breaking Bad. So again, this was sort of the most straightforward, the most necessary ending, just based on what exactly the story of Breaking Bad is. That's a good point at Holden Thompson. Making Lalo Salamanca a Salamanca, it did somewhat set his fate in stone, and it's actually interesting. I definitely recommend anyone who's interested who hasn't already listened to it, go back and listen to the Better Call Saul Insider podcast for episode 608. And it's kind of interesting. They've talked about this on previous episodes as well, but just the sort of thinking of where the story of Lalo will go in this entire universe. And it was actually kind of interesting. Vince Gilligan himself said that he wasn't really completely, what's the word I'm looking for? Just completely, his mind wasn't made up that even Lalo Salamanca would be a character that would even be introduced in this world to begin with. He said that, Saul Goodman, there are so many people in his realm. There's so many people that he mentioned over the course of Breaking Bad. We don't necessarily need to add this character. But according to Vince Gilligan, it was the pushing of Peter Gould saying, no, we need this character. We need to incorporate this backstory into the plot of Better Call Saul. And as Vince Gilligan said, we're all the more richer for it, for having been able to see it unfold on screen. So yeah, it was just an interesting, like Holden Thompson said, I guess they could have maybe not made him a Salamanca, maybe. But again, I really enjoyed the story that unfolded between all of these characters. I really enjoyed the story of Lalo Salamanca. I just love seeing this sort of adversary go head-to-head against Gus Fring. He was a very formidable adversary, so much so that, again, I always remind myself just how intelligent and how powerful of a character Gus Fring was over the course of Breaking Bad. And it's true, he was somewhat diminished in this season, in my opinion, because there was such a formidable adversary of Lalo Salamanca who was out there and causing him distress. And it actually reminded me a lot of Walter White in season 4 of Breaking Bad, where over the first 3 seasons, Walter White was just this unbelievable, intelligent, and powerful character, just this unbelievable character who was so, again, extremely intelligent, 1-2 steps ahead of everyone he went up against, but he finally came head-to-head with a very formidable adversary in Gus Fring. And it's kind of interesting how these 3 characters that Vince Gilligan mentioned of Gus Fring, Lalo Salamanca, and Walter White, they were just 3, like he said, geniuses who all sort of went head-to-head, somewhat indirectly. It was, like Vince Gilligan was sort of alluding to, maybe if Lalo had been victorious over Gus somehow, some way, he would have went up against Walter White in an alternate universe of Breaking Bad. That's kind of an interesting thought experiment for sure, but it was just three formidable adversaries, and Walter White was just, he came out victorious. And you can say maybe a little bit of it was luck, maybe it was a little bit the sort of emotional attachment that the characters such as Gus Fring and Lalo Salamanca allowed themselves to have, which ended up causing their downfall. And just to sort of think a little bit more back to the story of Lalo Salamanca, I just think when Lalo made that decision to fake his own death, again, he sort of went rogue here, and again, he really had this desire to undermine Gus Fring, and it was all about the Salamanca pride for him and his uncle Hector when they had this conversation in Season 6 of Better Call Saul. That, of course, also took place in Season 5 as well, and again, a pretty common trope in story writing for sure, of pride being a character's downfall. Definitely not the first time to see this for sure, but again, it was Lalo Salamanca's choice. I suppose that after Lalo Salamanca was able to thwart death at the hands of Gus Fring, he could have went to Don Eladio and told him what happened, and of course he could have had his insinuations, but I guess, if you just sort of play this game out and maybe Don Eladio wouldn't go for it, and long story long, I just feel like it probably would have been better in a, logical sense for Lalo Salamanca to continue living as opposed to going up against Gus Fring sort of head to head and dying prematurely in the name of the Salamanca pride, if you will. But again, it was Lalo's choice in the same way that Gus Fring could have just continued with this maybe corrupt bargain that he had with Don Eladio and the cartel, but instead he was just absolutely hell-bent on this revenge against them because of what Hector Salamanca did to his business partner Max Arciniega in the 1980s. And maybe Gus Fring would have still been alive as well because, again, this one little piece of just emotional, this one little piece of emotion that he allowed himself to eventually have ended up, causing his downfall as well. So I guess a sort of maybe warning of, a parable of how dangerous human emotions can be and how pride can really cause very intelligent characters like Lalo Salamanca and even Gus Fring and Walter White for that matter as well to do very irrational things. At the end of the day, we have to remember we're all human. We're all human beings. We're not robots. We have emotions. We act irrationally sometimes. So, is the microphone too bassy? I can turn it down. I apologize. Sorry about that, Connor the Esquire. Sorry about that. I hope that's better with the microphone. So, thanks for pointing that out for sure. I definitely appreciate the constructive criticism there. So, is that better? Is that better? I hope it's better. If it's, I can turn it down some more. Again, I'm definitely not a professional here. I'm just some guy on the internet here who's doing this for fun. So I'm definitely, I'll admit to a learning curve to to quote Walter White when Jesse Pinkman said, I wasn't on my knees with a gun to my head before I met you, and you're a greedy old ass. Something to that effect. So. But yeah, I mean, unbelievable character, like I've talked about, a true, I would say, in the pantheon of villains, and maybe if the story didn't require Lalo Salamanca to end this way so much, if it didn't require this ending, maybe they would have written a maybe more complex and nuanced ending to his character. But as I believe, was it Holden Thompson said, just putting the Salamanca name on Lalo sort of sealed his fate and made it necessary. So, and it was actually pretty interesting too, somewhat related to this as well. Again, great episode of the Insider Podcast. Definitely recommend you listen to it. Some of it, they talked a lot about the music score and things of that effect, but also they did talk about the fact that this was the episode 608 where Bob Odenkirk had his heart attack. And just to hear Vince Gilligan talk about it, I don't know if he's talked about it before in other sort of, areas of media online, but just him kind of, he didn't go too far in depth in this sort of process, but him just sort of having the thought process of him driving behind the ambulance, of taking Bob Odenkirk to the hospital, literally ruminating and thinking to himself, the show's over. Like if Bob passes away, the show is over. Again, pretty surreal there. And of course, at the same time, despite the fact he was thinking about the television show, he was also, of course, remembering this is a human being. For goodness sakes, there's so much bigger. There's more to life, and there's more important things in life than creating television. But just an unbelievable, sort of description by Vince Gilligan there, and how it literally happened during the scene with, I believe it was after Howard Hamlin's death when he was on the floor. It was the scenes of Jimmy and Kim sitting on the couch with Lalo Salamanca in the room. So, pretty crazy there for sure, how apparently they were all on set there, like Lalo, Tony Dalton, Patrick Fabian, Ray Seahorn, everyone was on set, Vince Gilligan directing when Bob Odenkirk had this heart attack. So, pretty wild for sure, to say the least. And, I'm not sure, Connor the Esquire. According to the Insider podcast, apparently it just happened when they were sitting on the couch. Apparently, the first shots that Vince Gilligan got apparently were the very close-up shots of Jesse, Jimmy, and Kim on the couch, and apparently that's when it had the heart attack. And all of the lines of dialogue of Lalo Salamanca in that scene were apparently pieced together 2 months later after Bob Odenkirk was able to return to set. So apparently it appeared not to happen during the chair stunt. It definitely makes a lot of sense that maybe it would, but apparently it just happened when they were just getting the close-up shots of Jimmy and Kim's face. So at James Madalena, I'm doing well. Thank you so much. I'm doing well. How about yourself? But yeah, pretty crazy. So to say the least. And it was kind of interesting where you don't even think about it, how when Lalo Salamanca was talking, that scene was filmed 2 months later after his heart attack. So, and also they talked about how they had to keep it a secret, because if they said Tony Dalton was on set as well, as Tony Dalton himself said in that Insider podcast, that would have been an unbelievable spoiler, how a scene was happening with Howard Hamlin, Lalo Salamanca, Kim Wexler, and Saul Goodman. Spoiler alert. So I believe they said that Patrick Fabian was on set, but apparently they kept it a secret that it happened to happen with the first scene with Tony Dalton and Patrick Fabian together. So quite serendipitous, if you will. I don't know if that maybe is the best connotation of a word, but just very surreal in all of this. At Smokeless Choice. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that you mentioned that. I wonder who is at that meeting at the Hacienda that's coming up, as we saw in the sort of photos teased for the upcoming episode. I don't want to get too much into that, but it is something to think about for sure, and just sort of how the cartel sort of factors into the rest of the storyline. At Devontae Mariki, thank you so much for the super chat. I felt like Lalo's dying smile was a thank you to Gus. I believe he really did respect Gus and enjoyed the cat and mouse game. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I think Tony Dalton gave his perspective on this scene as well, and they sort of asked him what his interpretation was of Lalo Salamanca's final smile to Gus Fring. Lalo Salamanca's final smile to Gus Fring. And his interpretation was quite similar to that, basically saying, just sort of laughing and saying, you SOB, you got the better of me, you lucky SOB, you won. Just sort of laughing, and there was a sort of, respect that he sort of delegated in a sort of odd way to Gus Fring. And that was sort of Tony Dalton's interpretation of this scene a little bit, that it was just, you lucky bastard, you got a lucky shot. And as Tony Dalton said, Lalo was probably thinking, see you in hell, Gus, good fight. So, again, sort of an interesting interpretation by Tony Dalton there for sure. But a very, again, I really enjoyed that sort of piece of writing that they put into it for sure. That just seemed like a perfect summation of how a character like Lalo Salamanca would go out, I think, like that. And it was about pride for him. And maybe you say that for the regular person, it's something like this isn't worth dying for, but maybe it was for a character like Lalo Salamanca. Maybe this was worth dying for, trying to expose Gus Fring, trying to reestablish the Salamanca name and the Salamanca pride that Hector Salamanca really, was very taken aback by when his distribution was cut off, so the Los Pollos Hermanos became the only means of distribution over the border. And when they had that final meeting that ensued at the end of season 3 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Smoke, where he said it is personal. It's Salamanca name, Salamanca money, Salamanca blood. It's not about, it's not just about the money. It's not just about the opulence and the wealth that comes from this business. It's about the respect, and it's about like he said, the Salamanca name. So I guess for Lalo, it was worth dying for. And I don't know what was going through Gus Fring's head when Hector eventually got the better of him in the finale of season 4 of Breaking Bad, in the episode entitled Face Off. Again, I'm not sure. Again, that was just my sort of interpretation of Lalo Salamanca's character. Maybe Gus Fring feels the same way, that it was worth trying to avenge the death of his business partner, and likely very much more in Max Arciniega, and doing everything he did, even though it ended up being his downfall. And despite it's such a sort of interesting storyline. I've thought about this, and even prior to season 6 of Better Call Saul, that despite everything that Gus Fring did to Hector Salamanca, and like he said to him in the Super Lab about how I kept Hector alive, and before he goes, he'll know that I took out every single last one of you, sort of paraphrasing a little bit. But at the end of the day, in a sort of sick, twisted way, I've thought about it, how maybe Hector sort of wins in the end. Again, maybe he doesn't win, but he doesn't lose. I don't know. I feel like nobody wins. A better way to say would, Gus Fring doesn't win. Maybe Hector doesn't win, but Gus Fring doesn't really win either. And it's just a sort of interesting way to sort of think about this storyline, how, despite the fact that now that Gus Fring's main adversary, Lalo Salamanca, is dealt with, and he's likely potentially going to become this more domineering character. Yeah, Hunter Ty, I kind of agree. He's going to maybe become this more domineering sort of character who's able to think 10, 20 steps ahead like he was in the plot of Breaking Bad. So, like I said, we are going to see that Salamanca meeting. Well, I don't know, Salamanca meeting, cartel meeting at the Hacienda in the episode to come. So, again, I just wonder where this story goes the rest of the way. I would definitely imagine a conversation between Gus and Hector is going to happen, like I said in a previous video as well. So at Mil M, thank you so much for the super chat. 2 main questions now. 1, would the real story with Hamlin be revealed somehow? 2, who is going to build the lab, since the Germans probably found out what happened to Casper? Interesting. Yeah, again, those are 2 interesting questions for sure. To work backwards, again, just by the nature of the show only having 5 episodes left, as much as I would like to see who ends up building a super lab, I don't know if it's too crucial. And to tell you the truth, it may just end up being more or less built during a time lapse, potentially. We have to remember that when the time lapse occurred in season 4 of a Better Call Saul, in the episode entitled something stupid, but it was something stupid, right? Yeah, something stupid. So a lot of something stupid, something unforgivable. A lot of episodes kind of got confusing, but we really didn't see a vast amount of the super lab being built. So much blasting and so much construction would have to be displayed to sort of, show the completion of that plot, where, we didn't really, it was fast forward through halfway through the building. So again, I'm not sure who, and it's actually interesting though, going back to, I believe it was Werner Ziegler's first appearance in season 4 of Better Call Saul. The episode is actually escaping my mind. I could probably find it if I look here. But again, the episode escaping my mind, if I can go back. Was it? I think it was Pinata, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Pinata, if this is when Werner came into the storyline. Yeah, I think it was Werner. But anyway, there's actually a really interesting story that happens there, where the first engineer that we see prior to Werner Ziegler, Gus Fring rejects him. And again, it's actually kind of interesting. We still don't know why Gus Fring rejected him. And there's really 2 theories in my opinion. One being that he was so sort of ostentatious and so maybe confident that it sort of made Gus be taken aback, and he sort of wanted someone who was more practical. That's one theory. And the second theory is that he had an anecdote about how he built a tunnel underneath Mexico to the U.S.-Mexico border, and due to the secrecy of this project, and he wanted it likely that Gus Fring wanted absolutely no association to Mexico or anyone building in Mexico to have anything to do with his lab, just by the nature of word of mouth maybe spreading in respect to a big project like this. You would imagine that no one from South America or Central America is going to build it. So maybe the German workers come back. I'm sort of trying to piece together this in my head after you asked this question. So it's a good question. I kind of think back to the episode Pinata when he made that, that decision to not hire, I believe, the French worker and went with Werner. Again, questionable decision for sure, just based on how everything went. So it is a good question. You do wonder, maybe they'll just gloss over it, like they sort of glossed over how Lalo was able to fake his own death, the step-by-step process, because we know the lab gets built in the end. We know it will get built. You would imagine there's going to be no hindrance with only 5 episodes left, so that's an interesting question for sure, and something to think about. And the first question you asked was, would the real story with Hamlin be revealed somehow? You wonder, it's potentially possible. But again, just based on the nature of Jimmy McGill, aka Saul Goodman, able to just get by scot-free and more or less live his life as a criminal lawyer, you would imagine that he doesn't get involved in it somehow, but maybe somehow Kim Wexler gets involved and the real story comes out somehow in which Saul is able to sort of skirt free of all responsibility. I do wonder. It's kind of interesting. And it's actually an interesting anecdote based on the Better Call Saul Insider podcast. Apparently, the shot of the beach was the only shot I think they filmed outside of the state of New Mexico for the entire series of Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad, if I'm not mistaken. They said they filmed it on a beach just outside Malibu. So, I mean, that actually is kind of plausible just in the nature of the storyline where, Howard Hamlin's feeling depressed and he drives out to Malibu and decides to end it for all intents and purposes. So yeah, it will be something to think about for sure. I'm really kind of curious to see the continuation of that storyline. And again, while, Lalo Salamanca, unbelievable character as his storyline is now concluded, there's still a lot of story left to tell for sure. And I really appreciate the super chat, Mil M. Thank you so much. And I see the other super chat as well. Thank you again, Mil M. Would Jesse with Emilio to Kim for legal advice? I mean, it's possible, yeah. You do wonder how Jesse Pinkman's going to factor into the storyline for sure. It's a question I've definitely thought about, especially now that since Lalo Salamanca is out of the game, and again, that sort of adds an entire new sort of perspective on how Walter White and Jesse Pinkman are going to fit into the storyline. I guess I did have these I think I might have just had these fleeting thoughts of just fan theory almost in a couple of live streams where I had this. In hindsight, it maybe is a little bit too fan fiction-y of Walter White washing the car of Patrick Fabian, Howard Hamlin, or Lalo Salamanca. I had this this fan theory that maybe he'd be washing that Jaguar or washing that one of whatever Lalo Salamanca was driving. I'm not too familiar with his car. Again, it was a Again, I don't know cars that well. I apologize. But again, maybe I was too fan theory. But again, you do wonder if Amelia will be a client of Saul Goodman, though. Again, I don't know how Kim's going to factor into it. It's kind of like I talked about in respect to the previous super chat, how you just wonder what's going to happen for Kim here. And again, you do again, I know she's doing the pro bono case, but we know that Amelia was a client of Saul Goodman. So I'd imagine that, Emilio going to Saul Goodman makes more sense. I mean, maybe Jesse meets Kim or Walter White meets Kim. It's definitely possible. I can see that for sure. I would imagine Jesse Pinkman had legal problems prior to him teaming up with Walter White for sure. And yeah, it's something to think about for sure at Mil M. Thank you so much again for the super chat. Definitely something to consider. It would be really cool to see Jesse and Kim, but I would imagine Emilio going with Saul just based on the continuity and the backstory of Breaking Bad. That's just my opinion, so... At Mendoza's Coyote, thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think Jimmy will get his Sandpiper money next episode? Can't wait till he finally buys his white Cadillac. That's actually a really interesting component. I actually hadn't even thought about that, to tell you the truth, about how, despite the fact that what they completely destroyed the reputation of Howard Hamlin. They completely embarrassed him. His final moment on Earth was just filled with this absolute embarrassment, and then his untimely accidental death as a sort of, grand sort of parable of unintended consequences. But at the same time, Saul Goodman, aka Jimmy McGill, and Kim Wexler are entitled to this money. So you could only imagine the sort of guilt that would maybe be overcome by them, where after they totally tear down this man and ruin his reputation and inadvertently get him killed, they're now getting this check for over $1 million, and they are entitled to that money, and Saul is absolutely going to get that money, and he's likely going to use it to maybe renovate his office in the style that we saw originally in the plot of Breaking Breaking Bad, maybe to buy that house that we've saw in that teaser prior to season 6 of Better Call Saul, as well as in the flash forward scene during the episode entitled Magic Man. So that's actually a really interesting component. I hadn't even thought about that, how, just an unbelievable scene of maybe them collecting that money just after everything that happened. And they got a man, it's blood money almost, to quote Jesse Pinkman. In many ways, it is blood money, in hindsight. It wasn't intended to be that way, but it absolutely is. And yeah, again, 5 episodes left. We have yet to see the white Cadillac outside of the flash forward scene in, not Magic Man, in Wine and Roses. I think I misspoke just earlier. So really appreciate the super chat, Mendoza's Coyote, and really great point, actually. I hadn't even considered that. That is a great point for sure. And I wonder if they'll display that to us in the upcoming episode. Thank you again so much for the super chat. Kate Valentine, thank you so much for the for the for the super chat as well. I appreciate the emoji. Thank you so much. At J Ladybug, 1970 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. That is right. I should have known that. I believe that's what Tim Roberts said to the other police detective when they were put the make and model on Lalo Salamanca's car. I believe that was in season 5 of Better Call Saul. I believe. Was that in the episode entitled Wexler v. Goodman, if I'm not mistaken? So yes, I should have remembered that. Good call. Thank you for sure. Appreciate that, Jay Ladybug. And thank you again, Kate Valentine, for the super chat. So yes, I did see that. I don't know if it got leaked at DJ129, but I did see the title for episode 10. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but I do have some thoughts on that for sure. So I did see that. And as I was asked earlier in this live stream about the flash forward montage scene that may take place in the remaining 5 episodes, I don't know if it's going to happen in episode 9, but it could happen in episode 10. Even just based on the nature of the title, I think it's possible. So at Point Blank, I think it's called OBS. It's a free software you can download. So yeah, I didn't even know that. I knew nothing about streaming. I just sort of Googled it. It's called OBS, and it's totally free. You can download it. So it's great software for sure. At Connor the Esquire, that's an interesting point. When you say how could they possibly continue conflict in Saul's story for the next 2 episodes, I figured the story would focus on Mike now. That's interesting. I mean, there's so much that needs to be told still with Jimmy and Kim, and that relationship. I mean, there's so much that I feel needs to be displayed there. I mean, I feel like while the sort of main antagonist and the threat of Lalo Salamanca is gone, I feel like the culmination of that relationship just absolutely needs to be displayed to us on screen, seemingly. As Mendoza's Coyote, I believe it was Mendoza's Coyote, said in respect to, getting the Sandpiper money maybe even in the next episode, just sort of seeing the fallout of that, and sort of Kim's reaction to that is just something that I feel like we need to see. And it's actually kind of interesting that you say Mike's storyline, because if I'm not mistaken, I believe for the upcoming episode of Fun and Games, the tagline for it is Gus attempts to smooth things over with the cartel, as evident by the photos, while Mike ties up loose ends. So I do wonder what sort of loose ends those are. Again, I don't want to speculate too much on it right now. I'll probably do it at a little bit later date. But yeah, I mean, you do wonder what sort of story is going to focus on with how the story is going to focus on Mike in these final 5 episodes for sure. And also, we need the Gene Tagovic storyline has yet to be addressed in these final 5 episodes. So I almost forget that there's we need to still address that storyline as well. So at Steve Bob JD, thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think Gene will be violent to Jeff? Kill him maybe, or just threaten him? That's a great question there. I really don't know. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure. There's that one teaser out there where it appears he's talking to the cab driver where he says, "I'm not your friend." This is more or less insinuating that maybe he's going to give him some money maybe, or something to that effect. Again, I'm sort of reading into this quotation that they teased. And if you don't come back for more, Again, that's a great question. You do, again, I truly have no idea how the storyline is going to end. And in sort of the grand sort of scheme of things, I remember Peter Gould saying, I believe in Talking Saul, how in the second part of season 6 of Better Call Saul, these characters end up in locations that we just totally don't expect. And there's so many sort of twists and turns left, even after the death of Lalo'S Salamanca in these final 5 episodes. But to tell you the truth, I really haven't thought about the sort of storyline of Gene Takovic enough. I just really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, all those are possible. Violence, killing him, threatening him. I think he does threaten him for sure, but I just don't know how that storyline ends. We've seen that teaser of what appears to be him back in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So there's just so much unknown in respect to the storyline of Gene Takovic. I just don't know where it's going to go. I truly don't have an answer at this point in time. And it's just crazy to think that we haven't even seen this storyline yet through eight episodes of season 6 of Better Call Saul. So yeah, I mean, I wish I had an answer. I truly don't know. The recast is kind of a bummer to say the least. But, I mean, I have high hopes for the storyline being so immersing, I won't even notice it. That's an interesting point, Almeida's Army. I've thought about that as well. I have seen a theory online on Reddit that maybe it's the first episode to break away from the "and" title, where it's something and something, because Jimmy and Kim are no longer a couple anymore. I've seen that theory floating out there, but I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit longer before I have any conclusions on what's gonna happen there in episode 10. I feel like we still gotta watch episode 9, and so much to look forward to there. And I really think that time jump is likely coming in the future for sure. And at Steve Bob JD, thank you again so much for that super chat. I really appreciate it. At James Madalena, do you think Mike learns of Kim being switched and he hates Jimmy for it? And that's why he's so upset with Saul. Do you think Mike learns of Kim being switched and hates Jimmy for it? And that's why he's so upset. What I'm not too sure. Thank you for the super chat, James Madalena. I'm not so sure what you mean by the first part of your question, and that's why he's so upset with Saul. What do you mean Kim being switched? I'm sorry, I'm not too sure what you mean by that question. Mike hates Jimmy for Kim being switched? If you could clarify that a little bit more, I'd be happy to answer your question, but I'm a little confused with the first part of that question. At the demented Mussolini FJB. That's an interesting sort of a theory there for sure. In respect to a Mike sort of looking down on Saul for sending Kim. Again, that's a very interesting sort of detail as well. And I really don't know. I really don't know what to think about that for sure. Go after Lalo. At James Banner. Do you think Mike learns of Kim being... Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I see, and I think the demented Mussolini is sort of leaning to that too. Okay, so do you think that Mike learns that Saul sent Kim in his place, and that's why he's so upset with Saul? That's an interesting theory. I think I see what you're saying there. I think the demented Mussolini was alluding to that as well. That's an interesting component of the storyline. I see what you're saying now, and again, that's a very interesting component. Like I said, you do wonder how maybe Mike would maybe look down on Saul for doing something like that, maybe sending his wife to do that. But again, this is actually a really interesting component of the storyline, and I was sort of thinking about that, and I don't think they really addressed it too much in the Insider podcast. They addressed it a little bit, but again, when Saul sends Kim in his place, as I sort of speculated in my live stream, was he more or less thinking, I'm dead, one of us is dead if we stay here? At least, Kim, you can go out, you can go to the police, you can save yourself. I'm trying to save you here. Did he really think that Kim was going to pull out the gun and pull the trigger? Which she absolutely did. She did pull the gun out of her pocket and point it at the door if you go back and watch that episode. But, I mean, was she going to shoot the man with the glasses who looked like the librarian, to sort of make a little bit of a, to kind of put a lighter spin on that? It's a great question. And again, it's hard to know it's sort of what was Saul thinking? What was Kim thinking? What is Mike's reaction to Saul sending Kim? Can Saul maybe have an alibi of, no, I wasn't sending her to do the dirty work. I was trying to save her. Again, we don't know what's in the characters' heads. We just don't know. And again, even Gus Fring's suspicion when Kim talks to him and says, Saul convinced Lalo to send me in his place. Again, there's just a lot of unknown here of what was in the characters' heads and what they were thinking. So that is a great question at James Madalena. And I definitely, it seems like something that Mike would get upset with Saul for, sending Kim to do this dirty work. But at the same time, I think he could absolutely rationalize it with, I was trying to save her. That's sort of what I was thinking when I was watching that scene. Like I talked about in some of my previous videos, we don't know what was going on in the characters' heads at the time because it wasn't outwardly revealed to us. And that's what I thought. I thought Saul was trying to save Kim in that point where you go, you get out of here, like you flee, you try to save yourself. But of course, at the same time, what she can't go, is she really going to go to the police and say, we have a dead Howard Hamlin on the floor? What led to all of this? And, telling her the truth of all of these more or less crimes she was committing and these frauds she was committing, and her not looking like a very good person in all of this, which inadvertently led to the death of this man. And everyone would know what would happen. The whole world, the whole Albuquerque legal community would know what Kim and Jimmy were doing, and this would totally ruin their reputation if they went to the police instead of her being saved by Mike. And it will be like some of the comments in the super chat said earlier with if I can go back to it with I believe it was, again, I'm sorry if I misquote here, with Mendoza's Coyote, with getting the Sandpiper money. It's just the sort of fallout of what happens next with Howard Hamlin's death being painted as a suicide, and with Mike telling them you're the last people to see him alive, so there's going to be a amount of suspicion against you irregardless, but you have to sort of put on airs. You have to go about your day. You have to, like you said, act like nothing is wrong. No looking downcast, no looking sullen, put the smile on your face, make you look not suspicious at all. So it's a really sort of interesting sort of question heading into this next episode for sure. And yeah, really appreciate the super chat at James Madalena. You really appreciate it. And maybe we'll get more reveals, to tell you the truth, in the upcoming episode as well. And I've heard people talk about as well, well, maybe Kim divulged to Saul that she knew that Lalo was alive the whole time. Maybe that's a component of the storyline as well. We just don't know. And again, so much story left to tell in these final 5 episodes, even with 3 of the main characters meeting their demise. So a lot to look forward to on Monday for sure. At Nima Rafai, again, I apologize with that name. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it, man. Sorry, I'm hopping on this live stream late. I think Lalo was clever enough to send Eladio and Bolsa videotape before he went to Gus. Basically, if you're watching this, Gus killed me. That's very interesting. I like that theory for sure. I've seen a lot of people floating out there that maybe he sent another tape, potentially. I definitely saw that as a possibility. As people pointed out, Mike Ehrmantraut really appeared to throw that videotape in the grave with Lalo Salamanca and Howard Hamlin. So that videotape, you'd imagine he destroyed. I don't know if he broke it up like Walter White did with his confession videotape in the pilot of Breaking Bad, but that videotape seems to be destroyed, as I talked about in my previous video. But that's a very interesting theory for sure. I like that theory a lot, about a second videotape or something else that he maybe sent him. And as it says right here, Gus attempts to smooth things over with the cartel, but you wonder what this may be, because Gus Fring is in good standing currently in the cartel, so maybe he did send a videotape already. Maybe he sent that first part of that videotape that he filmed in the sewer already to Don Eladio. It's possible for sure. I like your theory as well that maybe there's additional information on this tape of this, as well as, if you're watching this, I'm already dead, something akin to that. I do like that theory a lot, and you would imagine that this meeting that's going to take place in Fun and Games will likely incorporate that. And as I pointed out in my video, sort of looking at the photos here, again, we can't really tell where this scene is with Gus Fring. Again, I'm not sure if it's the super lab or he's either looking down at Lalo's grave or he's looking down at the pool of Max Arseniego's death, seemingly one of those two places. So really curious to see what this. There is something that needs to be smooth over according to the description for this upcoming episode, and I like that theory a lot. And plus, they already sent out that sort of very cryptic photo of that tape that says for Don Eladio. So I really like that theory. Nima Rafi'i. Again, I'm so sorry on that name, and really thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate the support, man. Thank you so much. That's at Will K. That's actually an interesting point you raised. How Lalo was only in Albuquerque for 4 nights, and they again, I listened to the Better Call Saul Insider podcast today, and it's actually kind of interesting. They kind of talked about how this previous episode of Point and Shoot, it was they sort of I believe it was again, I'm gonna mess up the name here. I believe it was Gordon Smith who talked about it, one of the writers for this episode, who said this episode was kind of like a real time episode where it basically almost took place over the course of an hour, more or less. It was kind of a real time thing where the whole episode elapsed in a very short amount of time in the universe of Better Call Saul. So that's actually kind of an interesting point that you bring up, how Lalo was only in Albuquerque for a very short amount of time. I believe you're probably talking about when he was spying on the industrial laundry. Maybe I didn't get the initial part of that, if there's a kind of conversation thread that's ensuing there in the comments, but it is something kind of interesting to sort of think about in this previous episode, so. At Almeida's Army. Great point there for sure. That sort of little comment that Mike says to Kim when they're getting a new refrigerator in order to, sneak Howard Hamlin's body outside of the apartment undetected. That's right. When he's showing her that sort of high-rise office with the corner office, she said she doesn't even have stainless in her home. That's true. That's a very good point. I like that indeed. Great call there for sure. Yeah, at Steve Bob JD, I tend to think so as well. That's definitely what I thought about in the moment. I definitely thought he was trying to save her. Just all of the looks that he gave to Kim was, you get out of here, you save yourself. But like I talked about, I don't think she wanted to go to the police. I mean, maybe she wasn't thinking very rationally because she was about to shoot a stranger in the face on behalf of more or less a stranger, but a very sort of dark and deep plot that ensued over the course of that episode for sure. So yeah, in the moment, I just really felt like he was trying to save Kim. So in that sense, maybe Mike wouldn't be too upset with him. And at the same time, like I've talked about, we have to remember that Mike was Jimmy McGill's, Saul Goodman's PI over the course of Breaking Bad. So that relationship is going to stay the course in the years to come. I mean, Walter White doesn't even come into the fold until 2008. And that's sort of when Mike is doing behind-the-scenes things for Saul Goodman, more or less being implied to be the PI who tracked Walter White down initially, which was also displayed to us in a deleted scene for that sort of storyline, being the one who cleans up Jane when he says Saul Goodman sent me. So that's 4 years down the line from now. So this relationship is going to stand the test of time, if you will. And even if Mike is mad at Saul in the moment, it's not going to be in a way where he doesn't work with him. I suppose if he chose to, wouldn't have to work with a character like Saul Goodman if he didn't want to. But also at the same time, with Saul and Kim now being so immersed in the life of his boss, Gus Fring, whether they know it or not, just sort of being a vigilant eye to the inner workings of Saul Goodman. And it's actually a really interesting point here. Again, if I can find the episode, I believe in season 3 of Breaking Bad. If I can try to find it. In season 3 of Breaking Bad, they have that meeting where Mike meets with Gus Fring on, I believe, the airport in the parking lot to sort of discuss the health situation of Walter White. And I don't want to get too far into the details of that scene. I believe it was definitely in green light because that was the episode where the drug deal went down at the end of that episode. But Gus effectively says to Mike, there's a great line in there where he says, "Does the lawyer know?" And Mike says, "Should he?" And Gus says, "No." So I kind of like that theory where I guess no matter what happens, no matter what Mike's perception of Saul Goodman is in the years to come, I just feel like maybe sort of Gus wants him there because Saul is deep, deep in the game, whether he knows it or not. And I really feel that sort of makes sense to me in respect to why that relationship stands the test of time for sure. So, and Nick Russ, thank you so much for the super chat, man. I really appreciate it. Not sure if anyone mentioned it already, but I don't think Kim will get arrested because of the Howard situation. Because if she did, they would want to see the body. But if she told them, Gus's lab would be discovered. Yeah, that's a good point. I would say for sure. I think Kim knows to keep her mouth shut. And again, that's a really great point. Hey, you wonder. No, I just couldn't. No, I was saying like, oh, is Gus or Mike gonna kill Kim? No way that happens, right? Wink, wink. That can happen. Nothing can happen to Kim, but yeah, that's a really great point for sure. Where there's the theory out there that Kim gets arrested, but again, I just don't know how that storyline concludes. And I really think back to what Peter Gould said. And there's actually an article that just came out in respect to just the unbelievable twists that are coming in these upcoming 5 episodes and characters just going in places that we never expected for them to go for sure. So that's a really great point. And to tell you the truth, even before that super chat there, I just really didn't think that Kim would get arrested. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's possible she ends up in prison. I guess it's possible, but those are really great points that you mention. Where maybe she says again why she would. Yeah, again, if she wouldn't. I don't think she would dare divulge everything because Mike says nothing. This never happened, and with her just being kidnapped by these men. And with her saying, "Who are you people?" Just understanding the gravity of turning on these men as well. I mean, she's dealt with characters like Lalo'S Salamanca. Does she really want to do this again? But at the same time, you just imagine her being racked with guilt. But, I mean, who knows? Despite, Ray Seahorn saying the ending is devastating, and in many ways, even her involvement with the death of Howard Hamlin really makes it devastating at Nick Russ. But who knows? Maybe we get the twist of the century where she is the silent partner in the end, despite the fact everyone's saying, if you're worried for Kim, you should be. And maybe the big twist is that, we all expect Kim to be this emotional wreck, but maybe she, too, is able to say, screw this, I'm going to look out for me. Who cares if Howard died? I can be this sort of, for lack of a better term, soulless character who moves on with my life too. I don't think that's going to happen, but again, I don't know what's going to happen with Kim. It's so open-ended. And like I said, the fact that Lalo Salamanca's death was kind of necessary based on the canon of Breaking Bad, it kind of took the suspense out a little bit, and it kind of really let the air out of the balloon in that final scene, and it wasn't as much of a twist and unexpected as deaths like Nacho Vargas and Howard Hamlin's. Whatever happens to Kim Wexler, I imagine it's just going to be unbelievably dramatic, and I imagine I'm going to be on the edge of my seat, and I mean, by definition, I'm going to be surprised by it. Of the death of, not the death, but of the conclusion of Gene Takovic as well, because I was thinking about this today at Nick Russ. In the grand scheme of things, we know what is going to happen to Gus and Mike, 2 of the remaining characters left. We know exactly what happens. Their story is more or less told. And in many respects, we know what happens with Saul Goodman as well. And really the only sort of open-ended characters are Gene Takovic and Kim Wexler at this point. Those are really the 2 open-ended situations. And like I've talked about when people have asked about Gene and when you're asking about Kim here, I just don't know. I really just don't know what's going to happen, but I can't wait to find out. And thank you again, Nick Russ, so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. At Connor the Esquire, I didn't see your message there. I apologize. Thank you for the super chat, though. At Mendoza's Coyote, thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think Don Eladio will approve of Gus having a secret lab in Breaking Bad? Gus takes Jesse... Wait, do you think Don Eladio will approve of Gus having a secret lab? In Breaking Bad, Gus takes Jesse to Mexico so they know he has his own place to cook meth. That's a really interesting... Again, another great point, Mendoza's Coyote, for sure. And again, also, before I get to that, I appreciate the super chat as well, Maximum Rock and Roll. I'll get to that next for sure. But yeah, that's a great point there, and that sort of begs the question of sort of when did Don Eladio find out about this lab? Again, or does he even ever find out about the lab? Because that's a really interesting point there, where he eventually, when Jesse goes down to cook that batch of meth in Mexico in their own sort of makeshift lab in the episode entitled Salud, I guess he knows that he's cooking somewhere, but again, maybe he doesn't know the scale of the super lab. Again, there's a lot of sort of unknowns and nuance with that storyline as well. There's a lot of open-ended nature in that storyline where we don't really know exactly what led to the sort of step-by-step, blow-by-blow that led to that confrontation with Don Eladio and Gus Fring. But it is kind of interesting just going back to Don Eladio's dialogue in that episode entitled Salud, where he says, there's no room for emotions in any of this, business is business. And he even says, I'm not mad, where it's actually kind of interesting, despite all the sort of things that he did to, or maybe implied that he did to Don Eladio, he's not upset with, Juan Bolsa getting killed or the cousins getting killed or any of that. He understands it's all part of the sort of cartel game here, where he has respect for Gus Fring. And it's kind of a sort of interesting dynamic where Don Eladio's head is at, where he's not mad at him. He reconciles with him. It's all about basically money for Don Eladio. It's not about emotions. It's not about pride or anything to that effect, seemingly, with Don Eladio. But yeah, that's actually a really interesting point you raised for sure in respect to that sort of storyline. And again, it's pretty open-ended. Mendoza's Coyote, we really don't, again, I really should probably go back and watch season 4 of Breaking Bad. I could probably recall it if I I have the episode right here. The season, this is season 3 actually, but yeah, there's that whole sort of storyline that ensues. Again, I'm trying to think what was the genesis. I remember Gus Fring's refrigerator truck gets hit by one of, I guess, Don Eladio's men. But again, I don't really recall off the top of my head what was the exact genesis of the sort of the confrontation between them. Maybe it was the fact that characters like Juan Bolsa had died in season 3 and the cousins had died in season 3, and Don Eladio kind of believing that Gus Fring was behind this, and that's what sort of caused Don Eladio to go after Gus Fring a little bit and kind of turn the screws on him. So again, yeah, there's a lot of, again, we don't know if Don Eladio ever finds out about the lab, even in season 4 of Breaking Bad. We're not too sure about that. And it's definitely something to think about for sure at Mendoza's Coyote. I'm definitely going to have to go back and sort of rewatch a little bit of season 4 of Breaking Bad in this upcoming week for sure. And thank you again so much for this the super chat. So definitely some good questions there for sure. At Maximum Rock and Roll, thank you so much for the super chat. I always saw Saul as being indirectly one of Gus's men. Gus seems to know about him because of that line in Breaking Bad, even if Jimmy doesn't know him. Yeah, Gus definitely knows about Saul. He definitely knows Saul exists for sure, just based on the backstory of Breaking Bad. And again, I made an entire video about this, actually, about, that very infamous piece of dialogue that Saul Goodman says to Walter White, where, Walter White said, after he says, what you two need is an honest-to-God businessman, someone who treats your product like the simple high-margin commodity that it is, someone who, ships out of town, deals only in bulk, someone who's been doing this for 20 years and never been caught. And then Walt's like, someone like that? And then Saul says, let's just say I know a guy who knows another guy. Let me make some phone calls. And then Walter White says to him something along the lines of, well, what's his name? And Saul, of course, says, I have absolutely no idea. He's careful that way. And he says, well, from what I do hear about him, he sounds a lot like you. And again, me quoting that episode aside, that's another really interesting component of the storyline that I am holding out hope is revealed to us somehow, because, again, we're sort of understanding how Saul knows that Mike works for some shady people at Maximum Rock and Roll, but we still don't, it's still not really displayed to us what exactly it is Saul Goodman, what Mike is doing for Gus Fring. You can imagine that Saul would know that Lalo was a cartel guy and Mike is working for an adversary of him, so he would understand. At this point, he would clearly be able to put 2 and 2 together and just understand that Mike is working for a drug dealer of some kind as well. So maybe this sort of whole event that happened with Lalo Salamanca is sort of the genesis of of Saul knowing who Mike works for, and that's sort of how he's able to eventually introduce Walter White and Jesse Pinkman to him. And you do wonder, that's again a great point where when Saul finally makes that decision to confront maybe is the wrong word, but sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Offer Walter White to be the silent partner. You do wonder if just him just realizing Mike's connection and him just seeing this person of Walter White with this unbelievable product, if the sort of temptation even for someone like Saul Goodman is just too much to resist, and where he thinks this is now the time for me to get involved this way and to make some serious money here. So it's a really crucial component of the backstory of Saul Goodman for sure, Maximum Rock and Roll. And like I said, can't wait to see if it's displayed to us in more detail, like the sort of backstory of Don Eladio and Gus Fring in the remaining 5 episodes to come in this season. And thank you again so much for the super chat. That's funny, Blake. Lyle likes his job too much. That's funny, man. Damn, am I buffering a lot at beaky turf? I apologize. My internet's been so bad. The connection's not the best. Oh, I probably shouldn't have just showed that to everyone. That probably wasn't the best thing to show, but yeah, I apologize if the internet quality is not the best. I can try to fix it a little bit. I can is it all right, or is it lagging a lot, or stream running well here? Okay, great. Yeah, Justin Cruz. I mean, maybe Kim gets arrested, but Saul. I mean, just based on the backstory of Breaking Bad, I just don't see it happening. So, I just don't see it happening. So, at again that name at Autumn Ration Nationism. Again, if you're talking about that fly that was on the videotape, that's definitely something I've thought about as well. Because I've seen a lot of people say that they've mentioned the fly from Breaking Bad, and after Lalo, and it's revealed to us that Lalo and Howard Hamlin are buried in the super lab. There's sort of a whole sort of different connotation with the fly, and the sort of decision to put the fly on that videotape, I think, was definitely intentional. And I just really don't know what to make of it at this point in time. At first, I thought it was a little bit of sort of almost a meme, if you will, about, a fly just happening to be having something to do with 2 bodies that were buried 6 feet deep and then covered with concrete, 5 years prior to Walter White and Jesse Pinkman ever cooking in the super lab. So, I mean, if you're talking about the fly, I have thought about that for sure. And it's just, I don't know at this point in time. I really don't know what to make of it. I don't know if it's a red herring or what, but definitely something to think about. So, oh, okay, Justin Cruz, I see what you're saying. What if Kim and Gene get arrested? I mean, that would be kind of a sort of interesting culmination of the story of these 2 characters. I've talked about how I don't think it's coincidence whatsoever that yeah, flags are everywhere at autumn rationationism. Autumn rationationism. There we go. But at Justin Cruz, it would be a sort of interesting culmination of that storyline. And like I talked about in the previous stream, I definitely don't think it's a coincidence that that license plate that we saw of Kim Wexler as a child in Nebraska was in black and white. I definitely think that's some foreshadowing for sure. So, food for thought, man. Again, I don't know what happens with Gene and Kim. Like I said, those are the two characters by which I just don't know what happens. I don't know what will be the conclusion of those two characters. I mean, because it's truly the only two characters whose storylines are completely open-ended. So, Joseph Wong, that's an interesting point you raised. The sort of Leopold and Loeb, the two kids who grew up from wealthy beginnings who killed the child for fun, and that's sort of who Howard called Jimmy and Kim. They both got arrested, right? And they both went to jail for the rest of their life. Hey, maybe like that's like Justin Cruz was kind of saying. Maybe it's potentially foreshadowing. I don't know. So that's a good point you raised, though. It's definitely possible for sure. And sorry, I just had David Wartsky. Flies are attracted to you know what. Yeah, at Toe Cutter, interesting name there. Did he even kill the fly right? Did he even kill the right fly? That's too funny. And not to get too nitpicky here, and not to play too much, not to be too much of a maybe contrarian, but I definitely know. Like, I don't know if you've ever had a fly in your house. Um, Before I get to that, thank you so much, Non Noble Soul, for the super chat. I really appreciate the support. Thank you so much. But again, I believe at Toe Cutter, kind of, interesting name there. But you say the Fly episode was kind of dumb, and again, that was a budget episode, if I'm not mistaken. How season 3 was just way over budget, and they just had to have a sort of, I guess there's a name for it. It's not budget episode. It's something else. I could sort of look at it here. The name's kind of getting me now. But what's the name of the? It's definitely there's a sort of name for it in production. I should well, I guess budget. The name's not important, but it was a budget episode. Uh, Toe Cutter. So again, apparently the show was way over budget. That's what the story is. So they had to do make a show that would cost way less money. I believe it was shot it was basically just the laundry, and then a little bit of Walter White's home. And I believe Skylar's voice was in the episode. She was singing the lullaby at the very beginning, but I believe it was just Walter White and Jesse Pinkman who were in the only 2 episodes of that episode. And not to be too much of a contrarian here, but I do know how flies are very hard to get rid of, especially the ones that are flying very, very quickly. But just a little bit of you maybe a crazy Russian hacker hack here. Windex. Windex is a good way to get them in the air. It stuns them. I think the ammonia just pummels them, and it's pretty safe to use around your home. It's way better than spraying some sort of very powerful bug spray in your home with a lot of chemicals and stuff. Windex is pretty safe. You can use it in your kitchen and stuff like that. You can spray it around your house. So if you ever have a fly in your house and you can't get it, Windex. That is my recommendation. I know maybe the PETA people won't like that, but it is true. It does work to kill a flying insect that's hard to smack. As Walter White had a lot of trouble doing in the episode Fly, and who knows? Maybe if they had a bottle of Windex lying there, he could have sprayed it immediately, and we wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have that episode. They would just went about the rest of their lives. So, bottle episode. There we go. Thank you so much, Jeremy Hill, Blake Schreckenbach. I think that's the term for sure. Connor the Esquire, thank you again for the super chat. Again, I apologize for not getting into it originally. Again, I saw them coming in, but I'll definitely get to all the super chats for sure. But again, I don't want to gloss over them or answer them. If it's an interesting question, I can really kind of get into it for sure. I really don't want to just gloss over it. So thank you again so much for the super chat. That's the point I'm getting at. Connor the Esquire, thank you so much. Do you think Saul Gene coming out of hiding will be broadcasted over the American news? And if so, will Jesse, Mr. Driscoll, be one of the many watching? That's our 1 of 3 cameo. And that's our 1 out of 3 cameo. Again, yeah, you do wonder. I mean, if I mean, with just going back to the episode entitled "Granite State" with Walter White getting all those newspapers from Mike Ehrmantraut, where he was doing the newspaper clippings, and even Ed the Disappearer was saying to him, "You are a wanted man. Your face is all over television." So you would imagine that Saul Goodman, aka Gene Takovic, well, not Gene Takovic, they don't know him as Gene Takovic, but Saul Goodman, his attorney, were would be absolutely huge news if he came out of hiding. You would imagine that it would be big news for sure. And so you're basically saying, would Jesse Pinkman be watching the watching TV? That's his cameo. Is that what you're sort of getting at Connor the Esquire? Jesse Pinkman watching the news and seeing how his lawyer Saul Goodman has come out of hiding. That would be the sort of Jesse Pinkman cameo. Is that what you're sort of alluding to? And I'm sorry to say I'm not sure what our 1 out of 3 cameo is. Am I missing something there? But yeah, I mean that's an interesting component. Again, they sort of like glossed over it a little bit in Breaking Bad. You didn't really get to see like the wall to wall news coverage, which I imagine happened, but it was kind of cool just to see uh, Ed the Disappear's dialogue in respect to Walter White being a wanted man. It's kind of really interesting to see the newspaper clippings. I think one of them said like, "Did the wife know?" Kind of alluding to Skylar's like knowledge of Walter White's um, illicit dealings. So that is kind of funny if you're kind of saying Jesse Pinkman be watching the news and seeing Saul Goodman if that's his cameo. I mean, I guess it's possible for sure. And thank you again so much for the super chat. So, and like a lot of the comments have said, I mean that Gene Takovic storyline, I've been really looking forward to it. I'm pretty damn bummed, Connor the Esquire, that we're not going to see the OG Jeff. He was apparently recast. I really bought into the OG Jeff. I was really looking forward to the continuation of that relationship between these two characters. But we'll get a new character. They recast him. He's much younger. It is what it is. But again, even though Lalo Salamanca's story is over, there's still so much I'm looking forward to seeing in these final 5 episodes for sure. Primitive instincts. That's a great scene that you're talking about there. About how after Saul initially rejects Walt and he goes back to Jesse Pinkman, he says that guy in there, Saul Goodman wouldn't take a bribe, and how Walt says to him, morally outraged. He said he was like threatened to call the police. You know, you wonder if Kim is a factor there. Again, I'm not too sure if it's dependent on that. I definitely think it's just Saul trying to, cover his ass there. And where it's true, you don't take bribes from strangers. Maybe he is a undercover officer. It's kind of, that's what you would say to, a stranger who was offering you a bribe like that. If you're a true hardened criminal, you just don't take bribes from strangers. So oh, one of the three. Okay, at J Ladybug. One. Okay, yeah. I believe there's gonna be 3 scenes. Yeah. That's what he was saying. Yeah. That's right. At Connor the Esquire. Yeah. Again, is Jesse watching TV gonna be one of them? I mean, potentially. So again, at at primitive instincts, I see what you're saying there, but again, I think Kim could factor into that story, but I don't think she has to. And again, I don't know. It would be quite the twist, and I think a little bit almost some maybe reverse psychology there. If Ray Seahorn was saying the ending of Kim Wexler's story is devastating, and it's because she ends up breaking bad, that's why it's devastating and being a silent partner with Saul. I don't know about that. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's possible. So, oh, I counted the Esquire. Okay, cool. So, one with Jesse, one with Walt, one with both. Yeah, again, I'm really curious to see how those characters factor in, and maybe the time jump ensues. You do wonder. I mean, we already seen that sort of teaser that's out there of Saul getting dressed in the mirror at his home, and his hair does look a little bit longer in that teaser, if I say so myself. So you do wonder if that takes place a little bit more in the future. So it's good questions for sure, man. I am really looking forward to seeing it. Okay, at Patrick Who again. I am not well versed in that. I guess I haven't been looking at the spoilers or the leaks too much. So there's going to be one scene with Walt, one with Jesse, and one with both. I did not know that if that's been confirmed. So that's going to be cool to see for sure. So at Mill M, thank you so much for the super chat. Are we going to have another heart racing episode? Again, I'm not sure. I'm not too sure. And it's true. I mean, despite the fact that, to tell you the truth, my heart really wasn't racing for the death of Nacho Varga or Howard Hamlin. It wasn't racing. It was more just shock when it happened. But my heart was absolutely racing in that previous episode of Point and Shoot. And there was just a lot of just absolute sort of heart racing scenes. But of course, it really came and went. When Kim Wexler was walking to that front door, I thought, what in the world is going to happen here? But then I sort of like went down here. I thought, nothing's going to happen to Mike. Nothing's going to happen to Gus with continuity. I mean, is Kim really going to die here right now? I mean, just away from Jimmy? Is that going to be the sort of storyline? And it was sort of like so it was sort of racing there, but I kind of had these thoughts in my head, so it kind of dissipated a little bit. But yeah, that again, so many just heart racing scenes. I mean, when Lalo was tying up Saul and talking to him, I'm just thinking, how does Saul get out of this? So that was pretty heart racing for sure. And like they said, there's going to be a lot of twists and turns at Mill M, but is it going to be as much of a heart racing episode as the one we just saw? I'm not too sure. Definitely can't wait to find out. So, and thank you again for the super chat, man. Really appreciate it. Yeah, at Green Lizard Balls, I tend to agree. I would imagine that, it's not with just back-to-back episodes like this. It's again, there was a like I said, at least how the fans felt. There was a little bit of a lull after the death of Nacho Varga. A lot of setup. I mean, if you listen to the fans, the kind of 3 episodes in between Nacho's death and then Howard's death and eventually Lalo's death. A lot of setup here. Not as heart racing, but again, it's you'd imagine that they don't want to sort of take their foot off the gas here after just going for lack of a better term, balls to the wall here in these last 2 episodes. I would imagine they're not going to take the foot off the gas at Green Lizard Ball. So at Millem, yeah, it's definitely something I've talked about in my previous videos. Thank you again for the super chat, man, about the $5 million reward for Saul being turned in by Jeff the cab driver. It makes a lot of sense for sure. It's why else do they show that poster and that teaser? That's definitely something I've talked about, and it just makes sense right away. Why would he even want to do anything illicit with Saul Goodman, to tell you the truth? Why would he do that when he can just turn him in for $5 million legitimately, legally, and not worry about having to do the illicit dealings with him and all of the sort of consequences that may ensue as a result of that? So it's definitely something I've thought about, and just because you replace Jeff does not make you Jeff, Mike. That's hilarious, man. Yeah, I agree. Great callback there to season 5 of Breaking Bad. In I believe what episode was that? Was that Hazard Pay? If I'm not mistaken, I think that was Hazard Pay. So yeah, great call there for sure. So, and I really appreciate the super chat, Milam. Thank you so much. Yeah, Mendoza's Coyote. I believe as well. I mean, I can't believe it as well, but I talked about it in a previous stream. It is what it is, and like I said, fingers crossed that the plot is so immersing that we don't even notice. Maybe we won't even notice that it's a different character when we're watching it, so. At Advit Sharma, do you think Kim's dying in the next episode? I guess it's possible. I mean, to tell you the truth, I really didn't think Lalo was going to die right after Howard, so if you want to go, bang, bang, bang with Kim Wexler meeting her demise somehow too, man, that would be something right there. And I mean, I believe Peter Gould said, if you're worried about Kim Wexler, you should be. Again, what does that mean? The sort of cryptic nature of that. She even said in that Variety interview, death is not the only tragic ending. So, again, I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. At Jose Espinoza, what's going to happen to Lyle? I love how that's basically turned into a meme. I mean, to tell you the truth, even before it kind of became into a meme, I thought that actor who portrays Lyle, and I believe the very first episode we saw him in was Sabrosito, if I'm not mistaken, when Hector confronts him at Los Pollos Hermanos. In that plot, I just thought the actor who portrayed that character was just spot on. He just does such a good job. It's just so believable that he's an assistant manager at Los Pollos Hermanos. He's just been an unbelievable sort of secondary character in this universe of Lyle. So I've loved the character ever since I first saw him, and I kind of really, good for him, good for the actor, how he's become, sort of a fan favorite in this series, almost kind of become a meme in many respects. But yeah, I mean, I think his character is great. It's really convincing, and more power to it. Lyle spinoff, as people are saying. At Advit Sharma, any Miguel appearance? I see what you did there. I see what you did there. That's a hell of a theory there, at Kate Valentine. Yeah, I mean, at Mendoza's Coyote, I mean, that's actually a really great point you raise. I mean, all joking aside, you say Lyle is a perfect employee. He had the Los Pollos Hermanos car freshener, was actually singing the Los Pollos song, and is always punctual. I mean, as much as I'm kind of joking here about his sort of character, I mean, it is kind of, really good sort of writing, if you will, in respect to Gus Fring talking about, uh, Gus Fring saying that, that one henchman who he put in his restaurant during the whole plot that ensued. I believe it was in a Hit and Run where he was not up to Los Pollos standards. I mean, Lyle is the model employee for someone like Gus Fring to hire. He is really the sort of ideal employee that Gus Fring would hire based on his standards. So, I think it's just really good writing in respect to his character. So, I mean, meme aside, I mean, I just think, Lyle's a great secondary character, and I think it's not a surprise that fans of the show really like him. I mean, Kate Valentine. I mean, dark things have happened in this show. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that seems kind of a little bit out there, but I guess who knows for sure. So, Timothy Crumpswell, man, that's funny. But yeah, I mean, just kind of in in wrapping up here a little bit in respect to Lalo Salamanca's character. I mean, it is true. I mean, you hate to see him go. He was such a great villain. But like I talked about a little bit earlier in this stream, and like Vince Gilligan said in the Insider podcast, how it's true. I mean, I really love the analogy he made of Walter White, Gus Fring, and Lalo Salamanca just being sort of geniuses that went head to head. Not all directly at the same time, but really any one of those three could have emerged victorious. And Walter White was able to, and he was sort of the person who kind of came in like that proverbial cancer and was able to disrupt this entire world and was able to sort of indirectly cause the death of all of these characters and have a part in this. And it is kind of it's a shame to see Lalo go. It's It's true though. The thing is, Lalo was emerging as such a great villain and such a powerful villain. If he almost emerged victorious in any way, the problem with that is it would by nature diminish Gus Fring as a character in Breaking Bad. So at the end of the day, Gus had to win. He had to be victorious, and it was a very even bout. It's just kind of like two people going to head, almost like two boxers, and someone. I mean, I guess you can't have a draw, I suppose, but someone had to emerge victorious, and it happened to be Gus Fring. If the cards maybe went slightly different, it definitely could have been Lalo Salamanca. I have heard people say, his sort of, maybe one of his fatal flaws could have been his desire to be a sort of showman and sort of grandstand. And I did think about it. I did wonder, and Vince Gilligan also talked about this on the Insider podcast as well, about how he really needed the proof in order to kill Gus Fring because he was such an important earner for Don Eladio. And what Don Eladio cares about more than anything, more or less, is money. And as long as he said to Hector Salamanca in season 5 of Better Call Saul, as long as he brings in money, he's protected. So he really needed that absolute concrete assurance that Gus Fring was behind all of this. And again, you do wonder. I mean, it was even. I think someone even asked this on the Insider podcast, where why did he let Gus Fring talk for as long as he did? I mean, after he said all of that stuff, he could have just shot him right away. As soon as he said all those things. I mean, that almost is a smoking gun there, more or less. But again, I guess it was just hubris by, as Don Simpanero said, hubris was a part of it. In the same way where Gus Fring could have sent Tyrus to kill Hector. Well, I don't know if that's hubris per se. That might have been more pride. But again, hindsight is 2020. It's like the Captain Hindsight from South Park. You can definitely go back and say this character should have done this, should have done that. And even in your own lives, like I said, we're all humans, and in the moment we don't necessarily make the best decision, and maybe a couple days or hours or weeks later, you think, oh, if I did this, this, and this, it would have been much better. But of course, in the moment, you didn't think about that. And that's not how life works. So, just despite how unbelievable of a genius, again, Lalo Salamanca was just such a great character. Like I said, pantheon character in sort of antagonist villains. I put him up there with Anton Chigurh. I really do. I thought he was just unbelievable. But just by the nature of the series that he was created in, he just sort of had to meet his demise here. Just by the nature of the story, and just so he didn't undermine, another great character like Gus Fring too much in the overall storyline. So, a great conclusion to his character that, like I said, needed to happen. So, at Nick Russ, thank you so much for the super chat. It's cool how we got to see good and evil, chaos and order, the lawyer and the criminal buried together forever. Yeah, again, that's a whole nother component of the storyline. Just unbelievable. Again, I talked a little bit about it in my live stream, just the sort of literary symbolism of all of that, like you mentioned in your super chat there. It's so true, good and evil, chaos and order. They're kind of lawyer and criminal. They are kind of, polar opposites in many respects, Lalo and Howard, and together forever, as that tweet by Patrick Fabian sort of alluded to. So a lot of literary symbolism there for sure, and just a great piece of writing there. Just as much as, like I said, as much as the death was of Lalo, I kind of saw it coming. The writing in that episode was just unbelievable, and it was just very poetic, and just a great conclusion to Lalo's character, and a necessary one. At Just Dan, thank you so much for the super chat. It's rumored Lyle will get his own new spinoff after Better Call Saul called Better Dial Lyle. Isn't that kind of a meme? I mean, I really appreciate the super chat. I think I've seen that Better Dial Lyle, but that's pretty much a meme, right? I mean, I couldn't imagine that Lyle actually gets a spinoff. I mean, I would watch it 100 times out of 100, but that can't be real. At Ice Blue, if you're referring to the sort of conclusion of Lalo Salamanca saying it wasn't a great conclusion, again, I know some people, there are people out there who weren't the biggest fan of the ending, and to tell you the truth, like I said, I just feel like, I mean, are you kind of insinuating that just like it wasn't a great conclusion just because it was sort of predictable in that sense where they sort of went by the canon of Gus Fring's dialogue, where they just sort of they had to kill him off because it would have just been too complex maybe to write his a more complex story perhaps. I mean, in after initially thinking about it, I was kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say sort of, I wasn't disappointed in it, but it was definitely, I admit it, I saw it coming a mile away. I knew as soon as Gus Fring, as soon as Lalo shot those four men, I knew he's dying. I mean, I don't know whatever happens here, he's absolutely dying. I knew he had to die, but I enjoyed the ending for sure. I mean, it was predictable, but by nature it had to be. Just based on the sort of canon of Breaking Bad and the sort of way the story was sort of written. So, yeah, at Mike 87 Kush, yeah, I for sure, I would say so. The second Lalo drove to a laundromat, it was obviously over. Again, I don't know about when he went to the laundromat, but when Gus Fring got there, I knew it was over. When as soon as Gus Fring went to the laundromat, it was over. I thought maybe Lalo would get into the laundromat, would sort of kill these guards, and somehow get into the super lab, and maybe you would sort of end on a cliffhanger like that. But once he saw Gus Fring, I knew there's no way out for Lalo. There's just no way for sure. At Ice Blue, again, that's an interesting sort of point. Again, I have seen some people say too that they didn't sort of need to show the gun before the scene happened. And if we go back to actually season 6, episode 3, with that sort of scene of the glass in the trash can, I believe Gordon Smith himself said they chose not to display the glass because it was like a little bit, in his opinion, too much of a last time on Better Call Saul. Um, I mean, there was, I guess, one episode prior as opposed to several episodes prior in respect to the glass. I guess this was point and shoot, and he point that in there, and I believe Black and Blue, so that was 3 episodes prior. But again, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the sort of realism of all this and stuff like that. I definitely think Gus Fring is someone who I believe he prepared for this contingency, and you can definitely sort of go into the sort of artistic license of maybe he did practice that. Maybe he did cut the power in that spot and run to get the gun. Maybe he did try it multiple times. We don't know. In the same way, this is a heck of a pull here, but in MythBusters they said that 2 vials of hydrofluoric acid can't dissolve Emilio. But Vince Gilligan said, well, maybe, I mean, he was kind of joking here. Well, maybe off screen, Jesse got more acid, and he got something else that actually made the body, or something to that effect. But again, that's a heck of a pull here. But again, it's not going to please everyone for sure. And like I said, it was, in my opinion, absolutely, it was I would say, the least shocking of the 3 deaths that happened on screen for sure. Just based on the predictability of it, but I still enjoyed it for sure. Saul names Tio Alameda's army. Thank you so much for the super chat. Saul names Tio Salamanca when helping Walt in 413. Don't you think he moves against the family without knowing Lalo's dead? Will he find out Lalo died? Yeah, that's definitely possible for sure. That's a great point you raise. I see what you're saying there. And again, I mean, that was what, season 2, when he still thinks Lalo was alive. But of course, we don't know every single thing that occurred off screen with Saul Goodman. So it's very possible that off screen, not relating to Walter White whatsoever, because we know that whenever Saul Goodman appeared in Breaking Bad, excuse me, it was always in relation to Walter White, so it's very theoretically possible that he learned sometime between the end of season 4 and season 2 when he was kidnapped in the desert that Lalo was actually alive. It's very possible that he asked Mike about, or excuse me, that Lalo was definitively dead, as opposed to him, still thinking he's alive. That's a good point, though. That's a really good point. Where you would imagine that if he still thought Lalo was alive, maybe he wouldn't want to go after Hector Salamanca. That's actually a great point. That's a really great point you use for sure. That's a great point you raise. It's something I actually hadn't even thought about. That's a great point there. I really appreciate that for you raising that for sure. I hadn't even thought about that. And so yeah, just based on the artistic license of that, I would imagine that yeah, he probably would have learned that Lalo was definitively dead, as opposed to still thinking he was maybe alive in season 2 of Breaking Bad. Because yeah, he was going after Salamanca, and he knew Lalo was a Salamanca. So that's a great point you raised. Thank you so much for raising that Alameda's army. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much of reminding me of that plot detail. I really appreciate it. At Steve Bob JD, I'll take your word for it. I'm not too well versed in Star Wars. I know who Darth Vader is, but I don't know enough about his character to know about his personalities and mannerisms and things like that, like I do with Lalo Salamanca. But I'll take your word for it. I do like Lalo Salamanca for sure. He's up there. He has been a great antagonist in this entire universe. Probably my most favorite in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. But again, like I talked about in this universe, it's these the hero and the villain is very fluid. It's very nebulous and ambiguous, and that's one of the things I like so much about this show. But at CC, Kim will not be able to stand the guilt and will want to go to the police and may get killed for it by Gus sending Mike, I think. Again, oh my goodness. I don't know if that's possible. I mean, I see what you're getting at there, but I don't know how Mike and Saul could have the relationship they do if, Saul did that to Kim. Excuse me, if Mike did that to Kim. I don't know. That's tough to see. I mean, that would just make Saul look like just an absolute like soulless cold person if he somehow breaks up with Kim and then doesn't care that Mike does that to her and then lives the rest of his life in the manner that he does. Man, that would be dark. Again, I see what you're getting at there, but I'm not too sure if that's going to be the ultimate conclusion of Kim Wexler. So, at Mill M, I see what you're saying there in respect to sort of Mike's reaction to Howard, and again, I think it's just the sort of the similar reaction that he had to the innocent bystander who got killed in the storyline that ensued in the episode entitled "Nailed" with Jimenez. In addition to characters like Fred Whalen who got killed, the Good Samaritan, that had the biggest impact on him. But after that sort of speech that Gus Fring gives to him about how you're trying to correct something that can't be corrected, I definitely think it really had a great impact on him for sure. How this innocent bystander, was caught up in this like other innocent bystanders have been, when he's been, as a part of the game. And, even though Mike is doing this to try to help his family, he's human too. So, it was a very, very powerful scene there for sure. Just the reference that Mike paid to Howard. I really enjoyed that scene, definitely. So, at Nick Marizano, is it humanly possible to function off an hour of sleep, maybe two? I don't think so. I definitely don't think that's physically possible. I don't think you can sleep an hour a night. I wish you could. I mean, you could be so much more productive if you could do that. But me personally, I can't. No way I could function on that little sleep. Impossible. I mean, maybe for a short period of time, but not for your entire life. I don't think so. I really don't think that's possible. I think some people can get by on maybe 3 to 4 hours. I think that makes sense, but 1 or 2, That just not does not seem humanly possible to me. So yeah, Timothy Coombs. Well, that's a great point though. By the time they have to decompose Drew Sharp's body after the episode Dead Freight, again another sort of innocent bystander, and again, this is still the sort of distant past of Breaking Bad, and we're still in 2004. And by the time that scene happens, that's 5 years down the road, and you can imagine that all sorts of other things are going to ensue with Mike Ehrmantraut, with him just sort of having to, kill people on behalf of Gus Fring. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Again, like Peter Gould said, there's just no way to see Breaking Bad in the same light, even with 5 episodes left of this season so far. So it's just been absolutely great. Again, Mill M, I see what you're getting at there. Thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think Gus is okay with Kim knowing Gus's place? Again, she doesn't. I guess she sort of knows who he is, and again, maybe it's a little bit of a loose end there. You do wonder how that's going to impact that. You do. I mean, at the same time, it says right here, Mike ties up loose ends. What could that mean? I mean, is that getting rid of Kim? I mean, because she knows about the house. If that's what you're insinuating. And as we know, episode 10 is the first episode to break away from the Ann. So is it Jimmy and Kim are gone? I mean, is Kim gonna meet her demise in 609 as a loose end? That would be shocking. Talk about wow. I mean, if that's what you're sort of getting at there, I don't know. I mean, there's no sort of mind erase stick like in Men in Black, so I don't know if Gus isn't okay with it. I don't know what other course of action there is instead of the one I'm sort of insinuating here. So. That is a heck of a point you're raising there, and I really appreciate the super chat. Thank you. At old movies and TV shows, Rip Drew Sharp. Yep, another innocent bystander who was killed as a result of people in the game. Again, yeah, and I see. I mean, at Mill M, Tuco should be released from prison soon. Again, yeah, I mean, they're just. I could go on and on and on forever, just about how everything we've seen so far in Better Call Saul, how this completely sort of can reorient the way we view scenes in Breaking Bad. Again, I could go on forever about that. So, yeah, I mean, it's Tuco getting out of prison and sort of even that meeting that takes place in IFT with Juan Bolsa and sort of him telling the backstory about how Hector had a nephew named Tuco and all that sort of, again, that's a whole nother thing. I could go on forever about that, but just the sort of reorienting of our perspective. And again, before I sort of surmise too much about that scene, I still think we're absolutely going to see a scene with Gus and Hector in these final 5 episodes. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I just think we should probably wait to see that scene first before we kind of think about how sort of scenes with Gus and Hector are altered now, because they could be completely changed just based on the very next episode. So. Yeah, at Justin Cruz though, I mean, I go back to that teaser after Howard Hamlin's death of after all of that a happy ending, as Saul Goodman is saying in the black and white scene of Jimmy and Kim's apartment. So again, there's been a lot of dark speculation here for sure, but at the same time, maybe we do get a happy ending. And like I've talked about, despite how dark of an ending sort of Walter White's ending was in many respects, it also kind of had a little bit of even a happy ending vibe, even with the sort of music that was overlaid with that final scene. There was like, again, it was dark, but again, it was like there was definitely a sort of bittersweet victory, maybe to put it that way, for Walter White in that very last scene. So. Ooh, all right. And with that, I think I'm at the end of the stream here. But yeah, I really Sorry to end it so abruptly there, but again, I really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. I apologize if you were here for the very beginning of the stream with the Wi-Fi. I apologize if the connection wasn't the best. Technical difficulties, I am definitely no expert. I really apologize for that. But again, really appreciate the conversation tonight. Really appreciate the super chats. Definitely love to hear the theories. A lot of theories I haven't even considered. Just unbelievable sort of the way this show has sort of changed our perception of Breaking Bad and sort of how that's going to impact the last 5 episodes. I will be live on Sunday at Justin Cruz to preview more of the upcoming episode as opposed to sort of looking back to this episode with Lalo'S Salamanca. Again, apologize for the Wi-Fi problem at the very beginning, and again, really appreciate all the support from the Super Chats tonight. And again, really enjoy doing these streams. Love interacting, with the chat. Love talking about this show. And again, really appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you're in the United States, have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend. And I'll see you guys around. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be live again on Sunday.